Hey girl gang, hey super mamas, it's Dr. Joy here and you are watching Delivering Joy MD TV. Welcome. We are doing a combined Super Mama Sunday and Well Woman Wednesday, continuing our discussion on the rebirth of joy, reclaiming reproductive health and rights for Black birthers. And y'all, today I got the numbers, ladies. You know what they say, men lie, women lie, but numbers don't. And today I am joined by Dr. Alexis Dunn Amore, who is going to be talking to us about the numbers, the statistics, and how we're going to change these statistics. More importantly, you don't want to miss a single moment of today's episode, so make sure you keep watching, girl. All right, girls, we're back. So today I have the pleasure of introducing you to my girl, Lexi. I call her Lexi, but she is Dr. Lexi. And she is not only a certified nurse midwife, but she is a PhD, okay? So she has achieved the highest degree in the land, and she has developed a wonderful application that we're going to be telling you more about called Mama Love. But she's been very rooted and grounded in the facts, y'all, with receipts. So she's going to be telling us a little bit about statistics and furthermore, how we get data and how we change statistics. So please welcome Dr. Lexi. Hi, Dr. Lexi.
Hey, Dr. Joy. Thanks for having me. I just love your energy. It's I just love it.
Well, thank you. I always enjoy working with you because you bring such a passion to every project that we get to do together. And I knew it was so important when I started thinking and dreaming about us having this discussion that your voice was a part because you always bring those receipts. So I wanted to ask you a little bit first before we dig into the nitty gritty details about how you came to birth work, and then what made you want to transition into research?
So that's a loaded question. I'll start with the birth work first, and then we'll talk about the journey into research. So for me, I think birth work is a calling. So it was something I was always really interested in. So as a little girl, I remember my grandmother used to tell me these birth stories. She was one of like 18 or 19 or 20 kids, but she was number 3, and she used to help her mother to have the baby. So I just think I was always entranced with this concept of birth. And even as a 3-year-old, I had a older great aunt that used to smoke, and they told me that I told her, you shouldn't be smoking when you're pregnant. So I think it's always been something I've been drawn to. And so I started off my path. I thought I wanted to go into obstetrics, but then I discovered midwifery and kind of went into that direction. So after practicing for a period of time and just seeing all these outcomes, you know, in my family members and the patients I was taking care of, and then having a severe morbidity myself, I started to ask why. And the question was always, well, that's just how it is. And as a Black woman, that wasn't sufficient for me. So somebody told me I should get a PhD. And I was like, yeah, no. PhD, I was like, yeah, I don't care for statistics. Like, who does that? I don't do math. I just want to take care of moms and babies. But what I realized is that studies and numbers are just like a fancy way of asking questions and solving questions. So I figured if I was asking the questions that I was interested in, then the numbers would mean something. And so that's kind of how I swallowed the pill and went on and decided to get the doctorate. So that's kind of how I got there, but I was fighting it at first.
You know, and it's so interesting because when we met, I think I was precepting midwifery students,
Right.
and we somehow reconnected doing research. So, and that was something I never wanted to do. I was like, oh, research,
Yeah.
and I'm definitely not a math girl, but it's so cool that we were able to reconnect to this research. And so, you know, we hear all these statistics, and, you know, we hear about Black women being 2 to 3 times more likely to die in the state of Georgia during or around the time of childbirth. When you first started to see these statistics and hear these statistics, what was going through your head? How did that make you feel?
Well, it was very concerning. I mean, I'm like, why would it be that disparity. It wasn't shocking to me because we see the disparity in like preterm birth and preeclampsia and all the other kind of high risk conditions. And we know that those conditions will precipitate often these mortalities. But it just struck a chord in me that if I was going to be a Black woman researcher, that I needed to be more vocal and more active in trying to do something about it versus just kind of, sharing the numbers and sharing the risk factors. It made me shift my gears a little bit to doing more like interventions and figuring out how I can help Black moms in the state. So I think it triggered me. It made me sad. It made me frustrated. It made me really want to understand our medical infrastructure. And then how can I, as a midwife, do something about it? So that it kind of just put me on my new path of research.
Okay. I can totally see that, because that, I think, inspires a lot of us to do something different. I think that for my path was really similar. Like when I started to get involved in Black maternal mortality, it was really because I could see a lot of these stories and you can identify with them, right? Because you're like,
Right.
wow, that could be me. That could have been me.
Yeah.
And you think about it in terms of that was my sister, that was my mother, that was my aunt. Like how would I have felt had that been someone in my family, or had that been my best friend, or my cousin, or my sister? So
Right.
it gives you it fuels you a little bit more, and you get so passionate about it. It's the type of thing that keeps you up at night. And
Right.
so as we start to kind of like break down those statistics for Georgia specifically, what do you think is going to be the key driver to changing some of these statistics? How do you think that the work that you've done so far and that you are doing is going to really help to drive change?
So I think that it has to be a shift in where the solutions are coming from. So I believe that it has to come from the community. I believe that the answers that we seek are embedded in the community. So the more engagement there is with women and families in Georgia, the more innovation can happen, the more we can actually develop studies or interventions that are actually going to do something. Traditionally, when you're doing research, it has like more of a top-down approach. It's like there's these researchers that are all intelligent and have this knowledge, and they decide based on the literature what's important, and then they do a study and arrive at a conclusion. But I think it has to go in the reverse. You have to talk with those most affected, see what's going on that level, design those studies with the population, conduct those studies with the population, disseminate those findings with the population. Because I just don't think that the way we've been doing it is the right way. And I know there are some researchers that do work with their communities, but it's traditionally been the other way around. So that's kind of how I view problems. And it's why, like I said at the beginning, why I even decided to go into research. I was looking in my immediate community, which were the patients I was caring for, my family, myself, and seeing all these things and picking their brains about, so what do you think the issue is and what do you think can be done? And I think that has to be the kind of general approach.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that, we hear that old public health tenet, nothing about me without me, or nothing for me without me. And when we take that approach where we're actually including the people who are involved in this particular research question or problem, that actually changes the game. We have such a we're much more vested when it's us that's actually around the table. So like if it's the person who actually had the heart failure after birth, they're very invested in making sure
Right.
that we understand this problem at a very granular level, and that we're able to understand all of the risk factors, all of the things that surround that problem, and how to best support the family or the individual that has that problem. So I think it's very important for us to be able to match those up. So, for those people who are not researchers, and probably for me too, because I'm not very much of a researcher, can you explain a little bit about the difference between qualitative and quantitative research?
Yes, so there are different ways that you can collect information. So you can collect information by giving people surveys where you ask a question, and then those questions we can put into like different software and we can analyze them. So it's kind of like each question has a numerical value, and then we have ways of analyzing the numbers from the actual survey. So that's quantitative. Qualitative research is much more about, let's say I interview you and I ask you a series of questions, and then you share with me your perspective on it. And I interview several different people. And then there's qualitative software that will look for general themes and trends in the things that different people are saying throughout the different, let's say, interviews. And there are a lot of different qualitative methods, but effectively it's talking with the community of interest and just gathering their words and their feelings and their thoughts about things. And so the two work hand in hand. I think it's good to talk with people. You find the trends, and a lot of times the quantitative methods that we develop come from some of that qualitative analysis and intervention.
And I think that that's really important when it comes specifically to the Black community, because we have often had oral traditions that
Right.
have been passed down from generation to generation. We hear a lot of birth stories, a lot of pregnancy stories from our aunts, from our grandmothers, from our mothers, that may not have necessarily been written down, or we don't have medical records to back that up. But we've had that oral tradition, year after year after year, and we know that, oh, my grandmother said this happened, and then my aunt said that this happened. And so
Right.
the stories that we inherit are very important when it comes to our own births, and the things that are known to us from previous generations. So I think that qualitative research is very important to formulating the quantitative research that we're doing. And I think that for many years, some of this may have been missing from the mainstream research community because our
Absolutely.
voices were missing for many years
Exactly.
from the
Exactly.
mainstream research community. So, as a Black woman in research, how do you raise that when you're in a room full of mainstream or non melanated researchers?
When I first started out, I used to like code switch a lot, meaning I would, downplay a little bit of how I looked at things. But as I got stronger in my confidence as a researcher, it's kind of like when you do anything new. At first, you just emulate what you see. But over time, I found that I needed to show up as my true, authentic self. So, how I do that is just like you talked about the storytelling, whenever I do research, I contextualize it with the story. That's just my natural way of communicating. So let's say, for instance, I'm giving a talk about preterm labor and birth. I always tell this story about my best friend, and it's my actual best friend, who had a 23-week, 6-day baby. And I have this big picture of him that has her husband's wedding band on the arm. So that helps them to see, even though he's this big on the screen, he was really little if a wedding band could fit around his tiny little arm. And I talked about the experience of walking with her through that preterm labor and birth, and why I decided to do the type of research that I do. So I do that with all of my research. Even when I have the numbers that come out afterwards, I try to make people understand it like these are actual people and this was their lived experience. And this is what I found when I either gave them the quantitative surveys or some of the things that they told me while they were involved in my particular study. So I just use my culture and I try to frame my research within my culture.
Oh, I like that. I like that. I think that is very necessary, because that's one thing that kept me out of research for so long is the statistics and the numbers, but the stories I can always connect with. And then when you back up stories with statistics, that's very powerful data. I think
Yeah,
that's probably the
absolutely.
most powerful data. One thing I think that's so important for our viewers to understand is how statistics drive change. And I think when you produce a body of data and it comes out, then it can be used, right, for advocacy. So, have you ever experienced that? Have you seen that personally in the research communities that you've been a part of? Or can you give an example of how maybe research has helped to drive change in a specific area?
Yeah, I've seen it play out in a lot of ways. I'll just share something that I've personally done. So, our Georgia legislature had a committee that was trying to investigate root causes of maternal mortality. So they had a series of sessions. I don't know if you remember this. It was probably maybe about 2 years ago. They had people come in and testify to kind of give their thoughts or reasons why maternal mortality was happening and what the solutions could be.
Yeah,
So,
that's with Chairman Cooper, like the Health and Human
yeah,
Services Committee. Yeah,
yeah,
I remember.
right. So I went down there with another midwife because we thought that that would be a good time to present midwifery and how midwifery care has, we have better outcomes, how it could, save money, just kind of the whole midwifery model and present that to those legislatures. And so I think just giving them an idea, not that it's resulted in like change right now, but I think it's helped get midwifery into the minds of some of the legislatures as they start to think about what are some of the feasible things that we can do. How can we support midwives? How can we support their model of care? I've been hearing a lot of buzz about the midwifery model of care. And I think that just, even if it doesn't change the laws and policies right away, just planting those seeds is ever so critical. So that's something that I've been involved in directly. I've also known of researchers that when they were trying to figure out with preterm labor and birth about extending Medicaid for certain groups, that they realized that a lot of the neonatal and infant mortality was tied to the group of moms that were having that very early or those preterm births. And so that justified Medicaid expansion for some of those moms so that they were able to have the care that they needed. So that's an example of how you see trends in data and you can show these legislators, well, this is costing the state of Georgia this amount. It's affecting these families, it's costing this amount, and we're asking you to do X, Y, Z. So when you can show people with the data and show them with the numbers, it helps them to better understand just how much of a problem you're dealing with. If that makes sense. So we hear all these stories about maternal mortality, how women are 3 times more likely, but if you don't really contextualize it with the numbers, you can't show people exactly where are the issues so we can know where to intervene. And the statistics and the studies help you to see those kind of holes where you need to kind of come in.
Absolutely. I think that is absolutely critical because you don't want to throw money, resources, funding. No legislature wants to throw resources or funding or money at the wrong problem. So
Right.
if the research helps us identify exactly where the issue is so that we can be very strategic and specific in our efforts to correct the problem. So I think
Exactly.
that's really what makes research so important. And then there's also lots of data collection that's going on at the clinical level. So seeing how many people have high blood pressures that don't get treated. And then
Right.
breaking that down to the granular level and saying, okay, well, which nurse and which doctor did not treat that blood pressure, and
Right.
then going to those folks and saying, hey, at this day and time with this patient, was there a specific reason why this didn't happen? So
Yeah.
that's kind of the role that I've been stepping into lately, to do quality control measures. So there's so much that goes on with research, and it could be research that's going on in a lab, it could be research that's going on in a community, it could be research that's going on in a clinical setting. So research is vitally important. One thing I really wanted to hit during our conversation, Dr. Lexi, is the Mama Love website. I got a chance to drive it with a focus group recently, and I was blown away by this website. I mean, it is top-notch emerging technology where people can actually get in and put in some of the symptoms that they're having, and you've created all these algorithms that direct them to a really simplified kind of red light, yellow light, green light sort of thing that tells them, hey, you need to get somewhere right now, get help, or you need to call
Yeah.
somebody and be seen in a couple of days, or you're probably okay to just make a appointment, as soon as possible, but it's not probably an emergency. So I think that is amazing. How did you come up with that idea?
Dr. Joy, it was just from thinking about what I see in the clinic. So a lot of times, how they come in, we're assessing everything and we're giving education, but we throw so much at our patients that I don't think people really remember fully once they get home. And I know for a fact that mamas and families come in telling me that they Google everything. So I was like, well, there needs to be something out there that was developed by a researcher, by a Black woman, that's grounded in the literature, grounded in the evidence, that people know that they can go to if they're concerned about having any kind of high risk condition. So I just thought of Mama Love, and just so you know, Mama Love is a little acronym, but what it stands for is morbidity and mortality assessment, and then lifting outcomes via education. And so what the tool does is it allows you to go in, it's arranged head to toe, so you can select a variety of different physical symptoms. But it also, the part that I thought was really critical is that it has a mental health component, because I feel like sometimes when we're thinking about morbidity and mortality, we often don't think about the mental health components and how those intersect with some of the other risk factors. But then there's also the social component. You know, what does your social support look like? Do you have access to the things you need to be healthy? All those kind of things. And so, yeah, it triages you, and it kind of tells you, hey, like you said, you need to get to the ER or call 911 right now. Or like you said, you need to call your provider. So it's really geared towards giving people the resources that they need. When you get to the end of the tool, if, like, let's say you have symptoms that are associated with preeclampsia, then you have a link so you can go out and read more about it. The coolest thing that I like about it is everything that you select, you can put in a PDF. So if you feel like you can't communicate with your provider, or I hear a lot of women say they feel like they're not listened to when they say they have certain symptoms, you could just take this form and say, hey, look, I did this screener. These are my symptoms. I might not be able to verbalize them because I'm not a medical person, but based on this is what I'm feeling. It gives people a way to communicate more effectively with their provider. So it was just born out of literally spending time with families and wishing that they had resources to screen themselves.
I just thought that was so amazing. And when we look at the statistics in Georgia, we know that most of the maternal deaths that happen in the postpartum period when patients are already gone home from the hospital. We know that it's mainly due to heart failure and heart disease. So people may be having some non-specific symptoms, shortness of breath or chest pain or leg swelling. And so this kind of allows them to put these things in, and then it sends them down an algorithm, and they may not even be thinking heart disease if they don't have chest pain, but
Right.
it kind of tell them, hey, this could be a sign of heart failure. So you need to get to the hospital. I think
Right.
that's so helpful. And then they can print out this list of things that they should go over with their provider, or even hand to the provider and say, hey, I put my symptoms in, I put in how I was feeling, and here is what here are some of the things that I think we need to look at or look for. I think that's amazing. And I was absolutely impressed with the work that you've done. I was like, wow, this is so amazing. How long did it take you to develop that?
I've been working on it for about 2 years, but that's pandemic time, so I don't really know how that translates into real time, because I had kids home and it was a little bit rough. But it's been a labor of love, and I think once it's released, I hope that it's a great resource. And I just appreciate you, Dr. Joy, for taking the time, because when you were in the focus group along with some other providers, I was really nervous about. I'm like, this is the focus group that I'm really worried about. Like, what are they going to think? And it was so reassuring to me that sometimes you get in the weeds when you're developing something. So it's nice to get that feedback. So thank you for your professional expertise and for taking the time to help in the development of that tool.
Well, I think it's absolutely amazing because, like you said, when people don't know something, shoot, when I don't know something, I Google it, right? That is what they do. But sometimes Google gives patients just enough information to be dangerous or to be highly anxious. So I'm so glad that there are tools like this in the works, and there's mobile technology in the works that's going to actually be evidence-based, that people can trust when they look up things online. So I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the work that you're doing in research, and for bringing your authentic self and showing up as a Black woman, as a Black mother, in this space, because this is something that we absolutely need. Because like we said at the beginning, men lie and women lie, but numbers don't lie. I mean, you can kind of make them look funny, but at the
Yeah.
end of the day, they have to tell the truth, because it is what it is. It's just facts.
It's just
right?
facts, right?
Just facts. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Lexi, for joining us today on this episode. I have to ask one final question, though.
Okay.
You think about birth reimagined by the numbers. What do you think about in terms of reclaiming reproductive health and rights for Black birthers?
That's a loaded question, Dr. Joy. You will save the hardest question for last. Reclaiming birth from the numbers. If I had my perfect dream world, I wish there was literally no maternal death. I know that's a hard, number, but if there could be zero, that would be my dream. But knowing that that's not necessarily the case, just a place where Black women, Black families are safe, they feel secure, they feel loved, they are ecstatic about childbirth and not fearful, that they feel empowered, that they understand that birth is a sacred space that deserves to be protected, that they are the conduit by which life enters this realm. And that is a very sacred and special honor. And as a provider of color and a midwife of color and a researcher of color, I want it to be more of a community that guards that space in a way that families and future generations are protected in that transition. As mothers are born, as fathers are born, as babies are born, we have to make sure that we guard that sacred space, return to our roots, return to our heritage and our history. A lot of that was erased in the Middle Passage, and because of the racism and all the things in this country, we've lost our identity, which I think comes in many ways, but at the beginning, during our birth, is where we claim our heritage. And so I would like to see a return to that protection and that safety in childbirth.
Wow, I love it. I love it. So, thank you again, Dr. Lexi. I so appreciate your time and your voice and your wisdom. And we will catch you guys on the next episode. Make sure you're staying tuned on BTV and on my YouTube channel, Delivering Joy MD. We'll catch you next time, girl gang. Peace.